Hello world and welcome back to my Rewind Remix breakdown session series thing. I have done one video on the basis already of my track, so if you want to check that out, I'll link it here. And on this episode I want to talk about the vocals of my remix. And yeah, let's just get started with how they sound in the track.
Sometimes I get ahead of myself. I can burst out just cause I'm not feeling well.
Disclaimer here, I got rid of everything in the project file except the vocal tracks for the sake of my CPU. And yeah, as you could hear, I was aiming for this creepy and eerie vibe with the vocals. And I had one big inspiration for this, which is a track called Mask by Josh Pan and Away. You should definitely check it out. And here are some things that I copied from them, which is for once using this breathy voice. So instead of saying sometimes, I would go sometimes, which kind of made it hard for me to keep track of the pitch, but I think it worked out pretty well. And then in their track, they had a melody that circled around the notes of the 1, the 5th, and the 7th a lot. So I did that as well. So you can hear it. Sometimes, that's the 1. That's the 7th. Get ahead of, that's the 5th. And then they had one surprising major 3rd at the end of the verse. And I like to do that as well, but I did it in my head voice.
But I'd rewind if I could.
That's a major 3rd there. So fun story, when I sent this track for feedback, people thought it was out of key or something because of the major 3rd, and that got me scared because I really liked it that way and it didn't sound out of key, but I guess it was just some people and I left it that way. So let's get started with how the vocals are introduced, which is with this pretty generic reverse reverb tail that drops to 0 right when the bass guitar plays. We actually got some of these reverb tails all over the track, like on the build as well. And on the second build, I resampled that reverb tail and looped it and put some more reverb on it and then filtered it in and out and in. So we're building a lot of tension here. It actually sounds like there's a lot of reverb on the main vocal in this part, but it isn't, it's just this tail. And in the second build too, we got this check sample from the original. And it's being faded in using this reverb tail. Now enough about reverb tails. Let's talk about the main vocals.
Sometimes
And I'll switch off all the effects.
Sometimes I get ahead of myself.
And this is what we're left with. So coming from the recording, I had a file that needed to be denoised, and I'm using Edison's cleanup tool for that. And yeah, declicking, I don't know if it just happens to me, but my mouth always does these little click sounds even while singing on the best takes. So I hate those and I always get rid of them. This is just one random sample.
This song is the only way I could find to tell you
right there, like
to tell you
at the end of the tell you can hear this little click, and on the spectrogram you can see it there. So I don't know, I just hate those, so I edit them out manually, which is pretty tedious and I hate it. But yeah, adding them in later and then muting them so you can not hear a difference and the recording doesn't lose any duration. And yeah, that's my declicking process. So onto the common effects. Before I talk about the fun stuff, we got some EQ.
Sometimes I get ahead of myself.
Pretty self-explanatory, but my reference had a lot of highs and not a lot of lows, so that was that. And some compression.
Sometimes I get ahead of
Most importantly, active on the loud parts.
You know how to confess.
Then we got some de-essing.
I think too much that I should be thinking.
reducing the harshness of the s and f in the track. Then on the bass, we got a static reverb that makes it sound like it's in the room.
Sometimes I get ahead of myself.
In contrast to some longer reverb tails I'm adding in later for an effect. And then we got some multiband compression.
Sometimes I get ahead of myself. Sometimes I get ahead of...
And finally, I sometimes like to EQ after multiband compressing because some of the mids are missing, and I prefer to use the parametric EQ in contrast to playing around with those sliders here. So yeah, that's that. And then we got some fun stuff happening, which is, for example, this Mellow Productions auto pitch plugin. It's not doing any pitching actually, but I'm using it to have this form and shift knob, which I'm automating.
Give me a sign.
So it sounds like this instead of this.
Give me a sign.
Basically, like I had a bigger throat, and automating it, I don't know, just sounds cool and creepy at the same time. Then I got this top distortion. I'm pretty proud of it, but it turned out to be a really subtle effect in the end. But yeah, it's a camel crusher distorting the hell out of this signal, and then I'm only using the highs of it and compressing afterwards because the distortion happened before the EQing, and I wanted a flat, pretty constant layer above the normal tops, and the lows just stay the same. And yeah, if I overdid it, it would sound like this.
Sometimes I get ahead of myself.
But you can see it being automated here, so it's being increased towards the chorus.
Sometimes
but remaining rather subtle. This Saturn 2 instance just does the same, basically, just some saturation on the whole thing, but really, really gentle, really subtle. Something that's a necessity for me is when I add an effect that has some side effects like saturation, making something louder, or changing something about the frequency spectrum. I always get rid of the side effect changes as good as I can, like with this EQ here, and that way I can truly decide if I like the effect or not. Like, this mostly happens on distortion, so it gets louder and it sounds nicer, but that may be just because it's louder and not because it sounds better. So reducing the volume afterwards, it's the same thing. In this case, it's really, really subtle, I think.
Sometimes I get ahead of my... Sometimes I get it.
Sounds a bit brighter, I guess. And finally, we got some reverb fading in here.
Are you scared of people reading your mind? Or tell me, why do you never give me a sign?
I'm using the effector reverb here. I really like it, and it has really long tails. I'm separating it from the original signal, and then I'm EQing it. Sadly, you can't see this window, but I'm just taking out the highs.
Now this song is the only way I could find to tell you I am truly sorry, but I rewind if I...
And at those very last few notes of the verse, I'm turning the wet amount up.
But I rewind.
Which is because the drums stop playing there for a little moment.
Truly sorry, but I rewind if I could.
But then the reverb goes away to leave some room for the upcoming basses, which are being swept in as well. Finally, for this transition, I really liked this long reverb tail from the high note I was singing. I think I did something like this here. But this would argue with the upcoming chords, so instead I resampled it and made the reverb tail go along with the chords. Also, there's some sidechaining happening on them, and also some multiband compression. Alright, and then we're left with 2 more layers from the verse.
Burst out just cause I'm not feeling well.
Which is for once this stereo layer.
Burst out just cause I'm not feeling well.
It's pretty quiet, but it gives it some wideness, so I thought of it as necessary. It is form and shifted downwards a bit. It's not the same sample as the original recording. I didn't adjust the timing of the sample to the original sample, so that's why you can see all those cuts here and all those instances as well. Basically, I could do that with new time and new tone as well, but I like to see the waveforms on top of each other. So I'm always doing it in the playlist and then using the E3 mono algorithm, because on vocals it just sounds best if they are mono already. So yeah, the effects are pretty much the same, but then we got some wider, like without it, and with it, really wide. Finally, in the verse, we got this layer that was transposed down by an octave.
Gotta confess, yeah. Are you scared of people reading your mind?
Again, using E3 mono here, which technically keeps the format as is.
Gotta confess, yeah.
But doesn't sound natural at all. So I'm just using the lows here and yeah, fading it in.
Gotta confess, yeah. Are you scared of people reading your mind?
And then I think we got everything covered from the verses, so let's jump to the chorus.
I know I said things, now I regret this, but
the effects here are pretty much the same as in the verse, with 2 exceptions. So instead of the saturation, we have some distortion here.
I know I said things, now I regret.
And without it,
I know I said.
Makes it sound a bit more harsh. And then there's some bit crush that's being faded in.
Be kind, wish I could leave.
And also something I really like to do is turn off the reverb and turn it back on each iteration. So none of the chord information from the last chord goes into the next one. You can take a listen again.
I know I said things, now I regret this, but
to me that's pretty necessary. All right, moving on to the build. So what sounded like an echo delay or something here is actually just some repetition of the last syllable, and I'm fading it out and fading it back in again. But what makes it interesting here is these couple effects on the buzz, which is for one's dispatcher instance, which has all pass phase 5 times in a row. All pass phase is a dispersion alternative that's free, and by lifting up the intensity here, I'm making it sound more artificial towards the end. Also, I'm automating the frequency knob, so we get a little bit of pitch variation towards the end. A concept that's pretty important to me when working with vocals is making them blend with basses and synths. So what I did in this case is add a serum patch that does exactly the same thing as the vocals do, like this whine. It's just some noise with a bandpass filter on it that's going upwards. And I'm automating the time here, so they get longer and longer. And what I wanted to do is have one iteration start when the other one wasn't finished yet. So they overlap and we get this noisy kind of feel. And I did that simply by using 2 instances of the same patch and play them alternatingly. Then there's some reverb, so we have an open, roomy feel at the start of it, and towards the end we get very dry, and also mono, so we can bring out the wideness all in the moment of the drop again. And apparently there's a frequency shifter on it as well. This is how it sounds all together. Now finally, right before the drop, you can actually still hear the original sample. But I'm singing along with it. Fun story, I thought it said rewind as well, like and then it's being cut off into bass or whatever. But yeah, it's just saying wheel because that's apparently common in clubs. And I'm afraid I haven't made that experience yet, but people say wheel if you want to wheel the track. But yeah, whatever, it just goes well with the vocals, in my opinion. And that's that. Now, furthermore, let's take a look at the second verse with the same concept I mentioned earlier happening. Like we're coming from some wobbly basses and we somehow want to transition back to vocals. And I struggled a lot with that. And finally, I narrowed it down to those filtered and reversed bits of vocals. And in the context of the track, it sounds like this. At the very end of the track, you can hear the same principle as well. I'm filtering and changing the timing a lot here to make the vocals go along with the main melody in context of the track. But yeah, let's just cover the verse first. We have 2 layers here. One is hard pan to the right and one is hard pan to the left. And the latter is also transposed down by 3 semitones and sometimes 4 to go along with the key. I've been using the normal stretch algorithm here, so the duration of the sample doesn't change, but we have this natural form and shift, which sounded cool to me.
You disapprove of me and all the things I do. When you talk to me, you never speak your truth.
Now, towards the end of the second verse, I added a comp filter that emphasizes the root note of the track, which is F sharp.
When you talk to me, you never speak your...
And then it's being cut off at the very end.
Never speak your truth.
While making the vocal not perfectly a hard pan to the right and left, but I'm reducing the stereo separation of the whole channel to put it more in the middle.
Truth.
And finally, there's another effect here, which is a frequency shifter. And I learned this trick from Van. Right, you have to adjust the shift knob by just a small amount and then mix it to a maximum of 50%. That way you get this wobbly effect. And yeah, I automated the shift amount here so the wobbles get faster. Yeehaw! As you can see, there's also some form and shifting happening here. So transitioning to the second build, this was not intended. I had pitched down the second version of the verse. And on the truth note, it sounded like, oh, there was a key change, like 3 semitones downwards. And I felt like I needed to do that. So in the track, you can hear a bell that makes you understand, oh, we have a key change here, actually.
Truth.
And then these even more transposed versions of You Disapprove of Me go along with that, until finally I'm fading in back the original chorus, which is probably not the best way to go about key changes, but yeah, somehow I had to get back.
Fine, but I see your line just meant to be kind, wish I could rewind.
And apart from filters, volume automation, and a lot more reverb happening there, this is all it took to create some tension with the vocals. Finally, at the very end of the track, we have this effect, like slowing down the vocal and then going back in reverse at the same speed. And this was actually not as easy. If any of you guys and girls know how to do that easier, please hit me up. But what I did was just put the original sample reversed afterwards. So this is what it would sound like, and I added some filter and frequency shifter. But what I wanted to do is reduce the speed to 0 and then have it go back up. And I realized that with grow speed, where you have those timing curves, and yeah, it looked something like this. So this line here indicates the 0 speed line, and you want to get close to this amount of steepness and then go back up to the normal level. Sadly, you can't keep this delay in time further than 4 beats in grow speed, so I had to sample it. Yeah, and this is everything about the vocals I can tell you about right now. I hope you found this somewhat interesting. Always feel free to hit me up if you want to know anything. My DMs are open, and I just set up a Discord server last week. And I'd love you all to join if you want. So yeah, this is all in the description. And maybe I'll do one final video on the rest of the track. So have a nice day. Bye bye.
Kind wish I could rewind.